You're listening to Beyond the Couch podcast with Dr. Sally Nazari, where we look at you beyond the couch and build ways to enrich your life, share your triumphs, achieve your goals, and most importantly, where we'll be celebrating you. Let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Beyond the Couch podcast's Mindful Monday. I'm your host, licensed clinical psychologist, Reiki master teacher, and mindfulness facilitator, Dr. Sally Nazari. Today, I'm really excited to share with you a conversation I recently had about mindfully taking care of ourselves during times of transitions. I spoke with Rockland World Radio's Connections with Deborah Turner host and publisher of Natural Awakenings magazines, Deborah Turner herself. We spent some time going through the different ways that transitional periods can be challenging and yet a time where we can really shine in terms of our self-care. And in doing so, we can get through the transitions as best as possible and maybe even focus on the things that make these transitions exciting, powerful, and positive. Listen now to see how that conversation went. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I'm independent. You know it. You love it. You can't live without it. Rockland World Radio.
Welcome to Connections with Deborah Turner. I'm your host and publisher of Natural Awakenings magazine for the Hudson Valley West, a healthy and green living magazine. I'd like to welcome Dr. Sally Nazari. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Hello.
Glad to have you here again. I thought we could start with a little bit on your background and what it is that you do to help people.
Absolutely. I'm a licensed psychologist and a Reiki master teacher. I work with teens and adults who are looking to shake pain and fear after a difficult experience so that they can get back on track, feel like themselves again, and start cultivating a life that they celebrate. Mm-hmm. And one of the key things that I like to do is integrate a lot of just scientifically backed information along with complementary and alternative approaches. Mm-hmm. That way we have a whole perspective on how to help someone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know one thing that you're very passionate about is mindfulness.
Absolutely. Yes, it's one of my big passions.
Yes. So if you could talk a little bit first what it is and then let us know some practical ways we can apply it in our lives.
I think that's a really important topic for right now in particular, and especially on the heels of what you mentioned, that stress management is a big thing, especially around the holidays and going into the new year. Mindfulness has gotten a lot of attention in the last couple of years, and on the one hand, that's a really good thing because there's a lot of awareness, and it's an important tool that I think could be helpful in so many ways. On the other hand, some things about it become watered down. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of people are asking the question that you just raised, like, what exactly is mindfulness? Mm-hmm. And mindfulness refers to the idea of paying attention on purpose and just bringing awareness to what we're experiencing right here, right now, without the judgment and that inner critic that kind of tends to run off and race through our head. And the benefit of that is that it really allows us to notice what's happening for us so that we can make different kinds of decisions and have an impact on the experiences that we're encountering. So, for example, we may not have any kind of control or influence over, the traffic jam that's going on, and we find ourselves feeling flustered, and then our mind's kind of racing about like, oh, I need to get to this important meeting, or I need to rush home and make dinner, or I'm not done with my shopping yet, and this is cutting into my time. We can't really change that situation, but the suffering element of it can become optional. So it can help us just not feel as anxious. It can sort of shift what we're experiencing in that moment, even if the external circumstances aren't impacted. And one thing that's a little bit of a misunderstanding with mindfulness is that we have to sit down for 20 minutes and do sort of like this lotus pose with just the right music and the right lighting. And while that may be perfect and awesome, it's not always feasible. So then it can feel like another stressor and another thing that people have on their to-do list. So there are different ways of practicing mindfulness. And one tool I like to start people off with is something we always have with us, and that's our breathing, right? So just the simple act of just noticing what's happening with our breath. We don't have to change it. We don't have to play with it. Just kind of take notice and be curious about it and see like what's happening for my breathing right now, and just sort of following that. Mindful eating is also a topic I talk a lot about in my Mindfulness Matters group. That's a popular one. We bring chocolate. And, I think that's another key part is that when we bring this practice into the things we're already doing in our lives and things that we already love, it can make it easier to just kind of connect with. And a lot of studies do show that the benefits of mindfulness have been profound. Like they are seeing an impact even just in our brain structure, right? And most of us have thought like our brain stops developing, but that's not true. We actually impact how its structure is shaped based on what we do repetitively, what we don't do, even the thinking patterns we have. But a little bit more relevant, like just to our day-to-day lives, people are feeling a little bit more relaxed in their lives, feeling a little bit more connected to the things that brought them joy and the people in their lives. And in as simple, like as short a time span as a couple of minutes, a couple of times a week, people can introduce this into their lives. So if you're waiting online at the grocery store, or if you're, stuck at that traffic light, it could be a perfect opportunity to just practice some of that mindful awareness.
Yeah, it's good when you can kind of tuck it into your everyday life, the things that you're doing when you're thinking and be like, oh, this is such a waste. I'm standing here in this line that's like has 20 people in front of me. And instead, if you say, okay, well, now I can practice mindful breathing, then you've spent that time well.
Absolutely. So, you're going to be stuck in that line regardless. And you have the option there of sitting and being flustered and standing there and just watching the clock, or like you said very nicely, using that time well. This is now an investment in yourself and your day, as well as all the people that you're going to interact with, because you're now showing up differently.
Right.
But it's also a couple of minutes that you didn't spend getting flustered, which I think can be priceless.
Right. That's true. And then it's also, as you said, it changes in how you react to other people. So then you're changing your energy, which kind of changes how other people are reacting as well. So it's...
Absolutely. We can kind of intervene on that domino effect right there, right? If I'm having a miserable day, and I kind of take that and in ways that I'm not necessarily aware of, I'm kind of dumping that into other people's laps. The reactivity there will impact me even more, right? But if I do take a step back and bring in that pause and allow myself to just have something that can be a little bit of a nicer, a more effective coping tool to just kind of bust some of that stress a little bit, it can shift that entire dynamic.
Yeah. And also I know another people have trouble with is finding time. And so finding it in this way is just good all around. But a lot of times people feel like, well, there's so many things I have to do for my kids and my family and work and whatever. So if I'm taking time for me, then you have that guilt about it. So
absolutely, I worked with a young woman who was studying for the bar exam and juggling a young child, and one thing she often said was that guilt feels like it's a part of relaxation. And she was speaking to exactly what you're referring to, that idea of there are already so many things, on our plate to do, and finding the time for things feels like an impossibility, like it's another thing now on this never-ending to-do list. And where do I find the time, let alone the energy for all these things? So finding those cracks of time, I think, is a wonderful way to make sure that you're getting those needs met, and those things that are going to re-energize you and get you feeling like your best self, so that you can juggle all of those other things. And interestingly, once we started doing that, she started feeling like she had more energy for things.
Right.
So you make a really important point about that. Other ways that we can find the time include just connecting with other people, so that we can now have sort of accountability buddies. And this way, we're now interactive. It can also be something we bring to families. I worked with a mother of 2 small children. I think they were under the age of 8, both of them. So she had a pretty full plate. And this was a skill she started doing with her children, just sort of right before bedtime. And I think it was also in the morning on certain days where there was a little bit more time. So again, that idea of it doesn't have to be perfect, and it doesn't have to be really long lasting or every single day. Just finding a couple of days a week where there is a little bit more flexibility, or keeping an eye out for parts in your routine where it does seem like there's a little bit of leeway where you can bring this in, can have a really powerful impact.
I think the idea of incorporating it with other people you're with, like your children, of like, okay, now we're all going to take 4 deep breaths or whatever, so because first of all, you're then teaching them good skills, you're getting the time in there, and you're spending time with them, so it's, a whole bunch of positives. And,
absolutely.
And you're getting what you need,
it's
part of what you need.
Yeah, you're getting what you need. They're also getting what they need, but also, like you highlighted, they're learning this skill as well, which will have a really important benefit for them, but also for you in terms of longer term, finding the time as well.
Yeah. So my little one is very kind of attuned to the whole meditation or whatever, and she doesn't last that long always, but if I'm in my little meditation area, she always wants to join me there, and
oh, that's great.
Pick my next, because a lot of times I'll like listen to like a YouTube meditation or something, and she wants to pick the next one or something, and so it
becomes a great way for you guys to connect and spend time together as well.
Right. Yeah. And now anytime she sees anything that has like the chakras or something, she's like, that's a meditation person, So
she's connecting with it as well.
Yes.
And I think maybe at some point she'll bring it to her friends, right? And then it could be something that continues to have that domino effect, but in a more positive way.
Yeah. So another topic I know that affects a lot of people is sleep, or good sleep.
Sleep is such an important area of our lives, and yet it doesn't really get the due attention that it warrants. And I think in particular this time of year where it is winter, and there is a lot happening for people, whether positive or negative, our sleep can go either way, right? For many people, there's just so much going on, and it's hard to turn off and shut their mind off at night, or it's just hard to wake up in the morning, or just not feeling rested. And yet what often ends up happening is that our sleep is part of what helps us regulate anything going on, whether it's, battling sickness, which is also going on this time of year, or just navigating like our emotions and how we're feeling in general. So when our sleep takes a hit, we have a more limited capacity to just handle some of those difficult, stressful moments that pop up for us. And we're also feeling exhausted, so it's really hard to just kind of find the patience for the things that are happening with us. So that's one of the reasons I offer both, Get Some Sleep group, and also just a one-time Sleep Solutions consultation, because sometimes it just takes a couple of tweaks in what's happening for us to make it a little bit easier for us to tolerate those things and kind of be at our best selves. So a couple of tips that I would suggest for people is that make sure that you're shutting everything off a little while, at least a half hour before you get yourself ready for bed. And I think, between our television and the different devices we have, and of course our phones, it's really hard to notice that we're engaging in those things so close to when we want to go to sleep or when we're hoping to fall asleep. And yet the light that those things have, we're processing them in a different way. And so we're kind of playing a little bit of a trick on our sensory input for like, this is now nighttime and we're feeling drowsy. So it has an impact on our circadian rhythms and how we actually prepare for the sleep cycle. So setting up a routine where we're actually leaving those things behind or in another room, and then making sure that we're doing something to kind of help settle ourselves, feel a little bit soothed, so that when we start feeling drowsy, rather than just sort of tired or overwhelmed or fatigued, then we go into our beds. And I think that's the other tip that I would give for people is often we feel tired all of the time and we just kind of hang out in bed or close to it. And what we're actually doing then is we're pairing our bed cues, like, just the routine of getting ready for bed or being around the bed, with staying awake, right? And then every time we try to go fall asleep, we're now battling this sleep urge, which is actually a biological drive, so it's going to happen at some point, with the idea of like, nope, I need to stay awake and keep doing more, right? So it becomes confusing, and we can easily intervene with that is like, just do other things away from your bed, even if it's sitting on the other end of your bed, not where you normally would be laying down. And if you're finding yourself waking up or not falling asleep, get up and go do something a little bit different after maybe 15, 20 minutes. And you don't have to watch the clock for that if it just feels like it's been that long. Get up and change your orientation a little bit and then come back so that we can start to break some of that cueing.
That makes a lot of sense. So then when you're in bed, your association, it's time to sleep.
Absolutely.
As opposed to it's time to watch one more show on the tablet or
exactly
the TV or whatever.
Which I think so many people are doing. They're, watching just one more show or one more episode and or even just reading or listening to, a podcast. And it feels like it might be relaxing because there's some winding down, but it's very confusing for that association now to be connected.
Right. And it's so easy to have all these, because everything's so small, it's so easy to have them all with you.
Absolutely.
So that you're right, that the bed doesn't become just a place you sleep.
Right. It sort of becomes the central location for all of these other things that really end up detracting from our quality of sleep. And that in turn has an impact on our stress levels, our patience, just the way that we handle our difficult emotions, and even our immune system. So then we end up getting sick and not realizing why.
And also at this time of year when it starts getting dark earlier and there's so many ways to make it bright that it confuses the body somewhat.
Absolutely. And this just adds to the confusion with that as well.
Yeah. You mentioned a little bit on holidays before, and obviously holidays for many very joyous, for others can be stressful, for others can be tough. So if you can talk a little bit about different things people can do during the holidays and different things just to even keep in mind. The holidays everything doesn't have to be perfect. It's really about, connecting with people and, those sorts of things so we can keep a good perspective.
I really like that point in particular. Like the holidays can be a really difficult period, and I think one of the things that amplifies that is there's sort of a pressure that I have to be, in good spirits, and I have to be, doing everything perfect, and I need to provide this for my community, and I need to give this to my family, and there's an added pressure that goes with that. And taking a step back to gain a little bit of perspective about, like, what is this for me? Like, what do the holidays mean? And what is it about these things that are important to me? And what are the ways that I can connect with those things? So being able to take that step back, I think sometimes we don't even feel like we have the permission, like we're not allowed to, right? I don't deserve to have a break because I didn't deliver this thing, or like I didn't, provide these certain things that I want my family to have. So I don't deserve this, right? So I think in particular, the holidays can feel a little bit tricky for people between just exacerbating that sense of everything needs to be just right because this is a very special time of year, and also sometimes this sense of like, well, I don't get to have that because I'm not good enough, right? So we can take a step back, but I think sometimes people often struggle with just being allowed to take that step back. And what I like to think of it as is, if this was a best friend or a sibling or another family member, would you want them to have that perspective? Would you want them feeling the same kind of sort of weighed down burden, and just sort of frazzled? And I sometimes refer to the holidays as the holidays with D-A-Z-E. Absolutely. Because for many people, they're feeling like, they're just on autopilot, and it becomes a struggle to get through it. So thinking about, like, if this was a loved one and they were in the same position that I'm in, chances are they might be to some extent. Would I want them to have some support, and what are the ways that I can give support to myself in that way? Or what are the ways that I can reach out for support? Which I think brings us to another element of the holidays that can be tough, is that sometimes people are feeling really shut off from others. They're feeling kind of disconnected or far from their family and their loved ones. Or there might be reminders of difficult holiday experiences, or someone that is no longer with them, that they enjoyed spending the holidays with. And what I would suggest in that case is being able to just kind of take a step back and look at the things that still are present in your life, the ways that we do still have connections and contacts, and maybe even coming up with a gratitude list about that. And what I would do is actually share that with people who are meaningful. And it could be your mailman. It'll brighten up their day. It could even be, to other colleagues. And one thing that'll help us do is shift our focus to start noticing the ways that we are still connected, and noticing the things that are still positive, and they may not be in line with, this perfect ideal we hold in our minds, but there's still beauty and connection there, and it'll help us have an openness to that, so that we can experience it a little bit more deeply, kind of like what mindfulness will offer for us. And if we're sharing it with other people, it now starts to deepen those connections, so that if we are feeling, for instance, lonely or disconnected, we're now finding ways of connecting a little bit more with some other people and forging stronger relationships as well.
I loved when you were saying about, think about from somebody else's perspective, like if it was like a friend or a sibling.
Yes.
What would you want for them? And also, like, I was thinking, what would you say to them? You'd be like, oh, take some time for yourself. That's important.
Absolutely.
So it's so much easier sometimes to say that to somebody else than it is to say it to yourself. So if you kind of think about it in that perspective, then it becomes a little easier to be like, oh yeah, I can do this for me too.
Absolutely. So, and you're right. We do say things to other people very differently than we do to ourselves. Right? And yet, turning that compassion onto ourselves can be one of the things that gifts those people around us in the biggest way possible.
Right. Absolutely. I know one thing that you often deal with is people having feelings of self-doubt and stuff. So if you can talk a little bit on what to do and why people tend to feel that way.
For many people that I see, and I think, many people just out there in general, self-doubt feels like it's kind of this never-ending bedfellow, and, it gets us to start questioning our sense of value and what we have to contribute to other people, and whether we even, deserve to have anything for ourselves. So it can be a little bit paralyzing, and I think one of the most paradoxical ways that shows up, yet one of the ways it makes the most sense, is that people feel like they don't, I can't even share this with anyone, right? I have to kind of suffer this in silence on my own. And, we often reinforce that because we focus so much on, discussing our gains and the positive things and our triumphs and things that we are proud of. And this is something that most people don't necessarily feel that way about. So it often feels like it's this hidden thing that, I have to kind of deal with and be ashamed of even further. And what that ends up doing is it further fuels that self-doubt that we have. And it may have started off with just some benign things that we experienced, and then other things, that we may not have had the skills to navigate at the time, that then kind of made this thought pattern at that time turn into like an absolute. And then it gets carried over into other situations. So one of the first ways to kind of navigate that is to really take stock of what it's doing. Self-doubt on its own isn't a bad thing. Sometimes it does serve us really well, right? There are examples of when we've sort of second-guessed ourselves, and then when we've taken that step back to question something, we've made a different decision that ultimately served us well. So we don't want to turn it off. What we want to do is put an on and off switch on it, right? That way there are times where we make the decision that this is something that is actually getting in my way. I don't need this here right now. Grateful to have the skill, but it's not serving me well. So one important way that we can do that is just kind of notice the things that we're telling ourselves. Now, most of us aren't in the habit of that. We have over 70,000 thoughts on any given day. So it's hard to keep track of that. So we might actually have to build that habit by maybe taking a few minutes each day and just jotting down like the kinds of things that are running through our head. We might just sort of look at a picture of ourselves or think about ourselves or something we did that day and just allow ourselves to just kind of see what comes to mind. And then take notice of the things that we're saying to ourselves. And again, that idea of, if I were saying this to a friend of mine, or a friend of mine was saying this to me, what would I think about that, And then I would sort of take a step back, and rather than further criticizing ourselves for having those judgmental thoughts, just kind of take stock of the fact that maybe some of these are valid, maybe they're not. Which ones are really here to serve me, and what's a more balanced way of thinking about this. And often people think that means, the exact opposite. So for example, if I'm doing this exercise and I'm looking at a picture, and I think, that I look like a towering giant because I'm so tall, someone might think the exact opposite would have to make it more balanced. So the problem there is that we're not going to buy into it, right? So it ends up not really working for us, and then we think we're a failure because we can't do this, and I should be able to do this. It's not that hard, and that cycle goes on. So where we might strike a more effective approach is going with a little bit more of a realistic thought, like, I look really tall in this picture, rather than I'm a towering giant. It's I look very tall in this picture, right? So just even simple shifts like the language of how we talk to ourselves can start to impact that self-doubt. And again, that idea of bringing that compassion towards ourselves, that we haven't built this skill yet, right? It's not something we've kind of had a focus on, and now, much like we would if we were helping, a young child learn to walk for the first time, each step that they take is a little bit wobbly, but we're cheering them on every step, because as they take the steps, even when they're wobbly, they're getting stronger and closer to getting, that skill set of walking down pat. And likewise, that self-doubt, it served something for us, right? So what we want to do is allow it to still do that, but also introduce the idea that sometimes it may not be doing that same thing.
So we're actually just about out of time. So I know briefly, if you want to mention, I know you mentioned you have a mindfulness group that's going to be starting up after the holidays.
Absolutely. I'll be posting some updates about exactly when the group will be starting, and it'll still be Mindful Monday, so it'll be Monday evenings. There will also be a Mindfulness Matters workshop, just a one-day workshop, and I'll absolutely be posting those as well.
Okay. And so you can let people know how they can reach you.
Sure. The best way to reach me is through my website at www.drsallynazari.com. You can also email me at drnazari@drsallynazari.com.
Well, thank you so much for being my guest today. And
it's a pleasure.
Great. I look forward to connecting with everyone again next time.
Thanks for listening to Beyond the Couch podcast, a space for celebrating you. The contents of this episode are for informational and supplemental purposes only, and not a substitute for professional services. For more access to you beyond the couch, check out www.drsallynazari.com.